Walk through the halls of Britain's royal collection and you'll stumble upon something strange. Dozens of paintings hang on those walls, all supposedly showing the same woman, Queen Charlotte. But look closer, really look. These portraits don't match. Some show a woman with African features, fuller lips, a broader nose, darker skin. Others show someone completely different, as if each artist tried to make her more European than the last. This isn't coincidence, this is erasure. The year is 1761. Britain's ships cross the Atlantic in a deadly triangle. Goods to Africa, enslaved people to the Americas, profits back to Britain. The empire grows rich on human suffering. And right at this moment, when Britain's wealth is built on the backs of enslaved Africans, King George III chooses his bride. Her name is Sophia Charlotte, a 17-year-old German princess from a place most people never heard of. She speaks no English. She's terrified. And according to witnesses who saw her, she has African ancestry. Most historians buried this truth. They hoped you'd never find out. But secrets like this don't stay hidden forever. Before we go deeper into this story, I need you to understand something. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about British royalty. If this story grips you, if it makes you question what else has been hidden from history, then join us here at Echoes of History. Hit that subscribe button because we dig up the truths that powerful people tried to bury. Now let's talk about why they wanted this particular truth to disappear. Charlotte's family tree stretches back through 9 generations to a Portuguese noblewoman named Margarita de Castro e Souza. Now, 15th century Portugal wasn't like the rest of Europe. For 700 years, the Moors, North African Muslims, had ruled the Iberian Peninsula. They didn't just occupy the land, they became part of it. They married into Portuguese nobility. Their blood mixed with royal lines. Margarita descended directly from King Alfonso III of Portugal and his mistress Madragana. Historians now believe Madragana was Moorish nobility. That means African. That African heritage passed down through generations, moving through royal marriages and noble houses until it reached a teenage girl in a small German duchy. That girl became Queen of England. When Charlotte arrived in Britain for her wedding, people noticed immediately. Sir Walter Scott, one of Britain's greatest writers, didn't sugarcoat his words. He called her face truly mulatto. That's not vague language, that's specific. Baron Christian Friedrich Stockmar, who knew the royal family personally, said the same thing. She had a mulatto face. Even Queen Victoria's personal physician noted her Negro physiognomy. These weren't enemies of the crown-making accusations. These were people inside the royal circle, writing down what they saw with their own eyes. But the most damning evidence? The paintings themselves. Alan Ramsay painted Charlotte right after she became queen in 1761 and 1762. Look at those early portraits. Her features are unmistakable. The broader nose, fuller lips, darker complexion, and facial structure that clearly shows African ancestry. Ramsay painted what stood before him. Then something shifts. As decades pass and new artists paint the queen, her features gradually transform. Her nose narrows, her lips thin, her skin lightens. By the time you reach her later portraits, you'd never believe these showed the same person. This wasn't different artistic styles. This was deliberate historical revision, painted stroke by stroke. But why? Why go through such effort to change how one woman looked? Because by the late 1700s, Britain faced a crisis. The abolition movement was growing. Former slaves like Olaudah Equiano were publishing first-hand accounts of slavery's horrors. People were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. Britain's response? Double down on racist pseudoscience. They needed to justify slavery, so they created an entire framework claiming Africans were biologically inferior. Scientists published books calling black people a separate, lesser species. Philosophers wrote that Africans lacked souls. Artists drew racist caricatures that dehumanized African features. Now imagine the nightmare. Their own queen has African blood. The woman sitting beside King George III, who birthed 15 children, who became grandmother to Queen Victoria. She carries the very ancestry they're claiming makes people subhuman. The contradiction is impossible. You can't enslave millions based on their African heritage, while your queen shares that same heritage. So you erase it. You commission new portraits. You stop mentioning Portuguese ancestry. You dismiss anyone who points out her features as rude. And you make absolutely certain this truth never enters the official historical record. Erasing Charlotte's ancestry meant erasing something bigger, the truth that every British royal after her carried African blood. Charlotte and George III had 15 children. Those children married into European royal families. They had children. Those children had children. By the 21st century, every single living descendant of Queen Charlotte, including King Charles III, Prince William, and Prince Harry, carries that genetic heritage. The British royal family has African ancestry. Period. And some of them seem to know it. Queen Victoria, Charlotte's granddaughter, was described with similar features. Darker skin for a European royal, broader facial structure. Her family nickname was Mrs. Brown, supposedly because of her relationship with servant John Brown. But some historians suggest it was also about her complexion. Prince Albert, Victoria's husband, reportedly had Moorish ancestry through his own German lineage. The genetic evidence kept accumulating generation after generation, even as the official story kept denying it. Jump to 1940. A Black American historian named J.A. Rogers published a book identifying Queen Charlotte as having African ancestry. The British establishment completely ignored him. They dismissed him as a fringe theorist pushing propaganda. Then in 1999, PBS aired a documentary investigating Charlotte's ancestry. They brought in genealogists. They traced her family tree back through those 9 generations to Margarita. They connected her to Moorish nobility. The evidence was substantial. Britain's response? Silence. The royal family made no comment. Most British historians called it speculation. History textbooks kept teaching that the British monarchy was purely European. Here's the question nobody wants to ask. Did Charlotte herself know? Almost certainly yes, she would have known her family history. She would have understood the Moorish ancestry in her Portuguese lineage. And her actions suggest she acknowledged it in subtle ways. Charlotte was unusually sympathetic to Black people for someone in her position. She personally supported Olaudah Equiano's abolition work. Extraordinary for a queen whose husband's government profited from slavery. She collected African art when such things were considered primitive. Some historians suggest Charlotte's famous interest in botany and her creation of Kew Gardens was influenced by African botanical traditions passed through her family's Moorish heritage. She built one of the world's greatest botanical collections, preserving thousands of African plants. She also reportedly faced mockery from British aristocracy about her appearance. There are accounts of nobles making cruel comments about her looks, using coded racist language. She would have understood exactly what they meant. Charlotte lived her entire adult life, knowing a truth the empire desperately tried to hide. She was Black, or at the very least, mixed race, and she sat on the throne of an empire that enslaved people who looked like her ancestors. The twist? In 1865, after the American Civil War ended slavery in the United States, and decades after Britain abolished slavery in 1833, Charlotte's granddaughter, Queen Victoria, was at the height of her power. She ruled as Empress of India over hundreds of millions of colonized people of color. The British Empire extracted wealth from Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean, while claiming Europeans were racially superior, bringing civilization to savage peoples. And the woman presiding over this racist imperial system was the granddaughter of a Black queen. Every British monarch after Charlotte descended from her. George IV, William IV, Victoria, Edward VII, George V, Edward VIII, George VI, Elizabeth II, and now Charles III, all carry her bloodline, the same royal family that colonized Africa, that created racist laws, that benefited from centuries of anti-black racism. That family has African ancestry running through every generation. When Prince Harry married Meghan Markle, a biracial American woman with black heritage, British tabloids attacked her viciously. They called her exotic. They criticized her looks. They treated her as an outsider, contaminating the pure British royal family. But Meghan wasn't bringing black ancestry into the royal family. It was already there. It had been there for 250 years. Harry was already of partial African descent. Their children simply continued a heritage that never actually left. The entire racist backlash was based on a lie. The lie that the royal family was purely white European. A lie maintained through centuries of repainted portraits, rewritten histories, and deliberate erasure. Here's what makes this story dangerous to acknowledge. If Britain admits Queen Charlotte was black, they have to admit the entire foundation of British colonialism was based on a lie. They told the world that Europeans were superior. That white skin meant civilization, intelligence, the right to rule. They used this lie to justify enslaving millions, colonizing continents, and extracting wealth that made Britain unimaginably rich. But if their own queen was black, everything falls apart. How can you claim racial superiority when your monarch doesn't meet your own racial criteria? How can you enslave people based on African ancestry when your king's children share that exact same ancestry? You can't. So you hide it. You paint over it. You dismiss evidence. You call anyone who mentions it a conspiracy theorist. Here's what they couldn't hide. Charlotte's legacy survived in other ways. Kew Gardens, which she expanded, became one of the world's most important centers for botanical science, preserving thousands of African plant species. The city of Charlotte in North Carolina was named after her during her reign and became a major American city. Her children and grandchildren spread her genetic heritage throughout European royalty. Most importantly, the truth survived. In oral histories of black communities who always knew, in genealogical records that careful researchers preserved, in those early portraits showing her real face before the whitewashing began. Queen Charlotte's story proves something crucial. Racial categories are social constructs, not biological facts. She was European enough to marry a king, but she carried the same African ancestry used to justify enslaving millions. The difference wasn't genetic, it was political. Her story proves the racial hierarchies used to justify colonialism and slavery were always about power, never biology. The science of racial superiority was always pseudoscience, designed to justify theft and violence. And her story proves black history isn't separate from European or American or world history. It's woven throughout everything, in royal bloodlines, in genetic code, everywhere, even where it was most violently erased. So who was the last black queen of England? Technically Queen Elizabeth II, who died in 2022, carrying the same African ancestry Charlotte brought into the royal line. But that's not the complete answer. The real answer is there never was a last black queen, because the British establishment never acknowledged there was a first one. They successfully erased Queen Charlotte's African heritage from official records. They painted over her features. They dismissed evidence. They maintained the lie for 250 years. But erasure isn't the same as non-existence. Charlotte was real. Her ancestry was real. And that heritage continues in every living descendant of the British royal family today. This story isn't just about one queen. It's about how history gets written, who gets to tell it, and what happens to truths that powerful people find inconvenient. The next time someone tells you black people have no history, remember Queen Charlotte. Remember that African blood runs through British royalty. Remember that the empire, claiming racial superiority, was ruled by a mixed-race queen. History is written by the powerful, but truth is written in genetics, in portraits, in documents they forgot to destroy, and in memories of people who refused to forget. Queen Charlotte was black. The British royal family has African ancestry. No amount of painted portraits, rewritten textbooks, or official denials can erase that truth. The last black queen of England, she's still on the throne. She's been there for centuries. They just keep pretending she isn't. Remember her name. Tell her story. because the most revolutionary act in a world built on lies is simply refusing to forget the truth.